Hello everyone, and welcome to my second video on this section on geography in early Europe. So when we jumped into this, we started talking about some of the variations of the topography throughout Europe. We talked about the many different mountain ranges, we talked about the open plains of Europe, and we talked about the many different rivers that cross throughout Europe. Today we're going to talk about some of the peninsulas, the differences between northern and southern Europe, how the climate affects what people can grow there and where people settled. And then we'll set you guys up for the review section coming up next. So, European peninsulas. There are many different peninsulas all throughout Europe. If you take a look at this map here on the right, this is far northern Europe. This is the Scandinavian peninsula, which is made up by some modern countries such as Norway, Sweden, and Finland. But as you can see, it's very mountainous and is very far north in Europe. So far northern Europe has many rugged hills and low mountains. And these hills and mountains are in the northern part of the British Isles and in Scandinavia. Scandinavia is Europe's largest peninsula, but it's not the only peninsula in Europe. In fact, Europe has many different peninsulas. Smaller peninsulas extend into the sea from many parts of Europe. And these peninsulas give Europe a very long, jagged coastline. But what's beneficial to this coastline is that there are a lot of coastal lands, flat lands, which people can farm. So those people of early Europe that weren't settling in river valleys were able to settle along the many different coastal lands. Climate and vegetation. So these two pictures here you have on the right. The top picture is going to show you far northern Europe in Scandinavia, where it can be very snowy at times. And the picture at the bottom is southern Europe, where it's often much warmer. Just like in the United States, in the middle of wintertime, you could go to Florida and experience some much warmer climate than you would if you went up to northern Maine, for example. So like its landforms, Europe's climates and vegetation vary widely from region to region. Southern Europe is largely warm and sunny. You have plants such as shrubs and trees that don't require as much rainfall that are common there. Most of northwestern Europe, however, is a lot milder and cooler and wetter climate. So they get a lot more moisture, a lot more rainfall. Cold winds from the north and northeast can bring freezing weather in the wintertime. Freezing weather is much more common in Scandinavia, though. And this will definitely affect the way that people live there. They're going to have to rely a lot more on the ocean as a source of food. That region is very cold throughout the year. Snow falls for much of the year, and few plants can survive the region's cold climates. Southern Europe. So talking specifically about Southern Europe, I put this map up on the right hand side so you can see the many different peninsulas throughout Southern Europe, and you can also see the topography. You could see how the lighter color indicates higher elevation, very mountainous throughout that area. Geography has greatly affected the history throughout Europe. It influenced where people lived and how they lived. In southern Europe, most people lived along coastal plains or in river valleys where land was flat for farming. People grew crops like grapes and olives that could survive the region's dry, hot summers. In the mountains where the land was steep and rocky, people raised sheep and goats. Southern Europe has many different peninsulas, so people don't live far from the sea. As a result, many became traders and seafarers. And as we talked about some of the civilizations south of this, and we talked about the Roman Empire, we talked about the ancient Greeks, we talked about how the Mediterranean was used greatly for trade. So Northern Europe is a bit different. Most people in Northern Europe lived a bit further from the sea. As we looked at some of the other maps, we saw that there were many open plains, very flat land that was open, so people were living typically along rivers. So living along the rivers, they still were able to access the sea by going up and down the rivers to get to it. Because the rivers were an easy method of transportation, towns grew up along them very well. Rivers also provided a means of protection. If someone wanted to attack you, they would have to make their way across the river in order to get to you. Paris, France is a great example of this. The picture on the left-hand side is actually Paris, and you can see that it is built on an island in the middle of the river. This was done so that it was hard for raiders to get into the city. In the fields around cities, farmers would grow all sorts of different crops. These fields were excellent farmlands, but being as it was very flat, open land, it was very easy for invaders to attack. And this is what forms the basis for many of the castles and kingdoms that we saw throughout Europe and how they were constantly battling each other. No mountains blocked people's access to northern Europe, and as a result, the region was frequently invaded. Okay, that finishes up the second video for geography in early Europe. We'll come back with one more video to review the entire section and talk about some of the more important points. Please complete your necessary activities and your exit ticket questions. And if you have any questions or comments, hit me up in Google Classroom or shoot me an email. Hope you're enjoying this week. Please take care.